Brings us to our next participant, Mr. Swazi.
Mr. Chairman, thank you so much. Mr. Ranking Member, members of the committee, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to these issues. As many of you know, I'm a freshman, and I'm very honored and humbled to serve as United States Congress member. I've been happily surprised by the amazing talent of the people that serve in this body, but I've been very unhappily surprised to find out how difficult it is to actually get something put on the floor, and how difficult it is to actually get things done here. I actually ran a campaign based on Swazi gets it done. Then I came to Congress and I was like, wait a minute, it's difficult to get things done here. I serve as the vice chairman of a group called the Problem Solvers Caucus, 24 Democrats and 24 Republicans trying to work together to actually find common ground to get things done. And we've made a proposal to break the gridlock here in the United States Congress and to make some rules changes to try and actually get more things done here and to get more things put on the floor. And there's 5 specific things that I want to make reference to at this time. Yes. Number 1 is that we want to make it more difficult to oust the Speaker. Right now, one person could call for the ouster of the Speaker, to vacate the Speaker. We think it should be more difficult to oust the Speaker. The Speaker won't be as intimidated to try things that are a little bit risky. And we think that it should require at least 1/3 of the members of the House to call for the ouster of the Speaker, and the Speaker will therefore be able to act a little bit more risk-free of putting things on the floor. Second is this House operates too much on closed rules that don't allow amendments to be offered to the rules that are proposed. From 1977 to 1979, 85% of the bills on the floor were open rules. Now that never happens. We think that in order for a closed rule to pass, it should require a 3/5 majority of the United States House of Representatives in order for it to pass. Therefore, it will be less likely that closed rules will be put on as commonly as they currently are. Number 3 is we'd like to have every member of the House have at least one bill of their choosing that will be put before the entire body during a Congress. So every 2 years, every member would have at least one bill that they could put on the floor that would be voted on by their colleagues. But at least everybody would have an opportunity, would force people to be a little bit more careful about what they propose, and at least have one bill every 2 years that they could put on the floor. Number 3, we think that if 2/3 of the House, or if the majority of each party are to support a bill, that bill should be allowed to be brought to the floor. So if you have 2/3 of the members of Congress, or you have a majority of each party, let's put the bill on the floor and let's put it up for vote. And finally, we think that the ratios in the committees, including the Rules Committee, should represent the representation of the different parties here in Congress, so that there would be more equity in every single committee, including the Rules Committee, so that every member, we all represent hundreds of thousands, 750,000 people in my district. It's different in different states. Montana has over 1 million people in their one congressional district. But we all represent a great number of Americans, and we come here to do a job. And we want to try and get things done. We want to try and make our country a better place to live in. And to do that, we need to work together. And to work together, I believe we need to put more things on the floor and debate them more openly. Every one of us knows of issues that are supported by 70, 80, 90% of Americans, but they're still not put on the floor for a vote. We need to change the rules to make it more accessible, to have this partisan, sometimes, debate on the floor so that every American can see us doing our jobs and actually confronting the questions that face our country. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I hope you'll consider these proposals.
Thank you, Mr. Lyon. Thank you for bringing the proposal. This clears up the first panel for both sides, and so if you have a question for the delegate or Ms. Burdella from Guam, or for Mr. Swazi, Mr. Byrne, do you have any questions?
Yes. I've been familiar with the work that y'all been doing in your group, and I really appreciate it. And I share a lot of your concerns, I really do. The handout we got has a lot more stuff in it than what you mentioned. I assume that you support all of this. Not
yes.
That. So the ultimate thing that you're trying to accomplish there is to allow people, members of Congress, regardless of which party they're in, whether they're in the majority or not, to have greater access with their the bills that they support, greater access to the floor, greater access, not have a committee chairman bottle things up, and not have the leadership bottle things up.
Well, there's no question that the majority has a role, and the majority should continue to have the advantages that they have, but there has to be some access to the whole body by different members in the minority, and in the majority, individual members have some access to the floor. So, you know, the idea of this one bill every 2 years is an interesting idea.
What was a bill that nobody else supports but that one member?
Say it again?
What if it's and this is an absurd example, but sometimes you get to the nub of things by using absurd examples. What if the bill you choose, there's only one person in the whole Congress that supports it, and it's you?
Then that person's going to get voted down overwhelmingly by their colleagues, and people are going to see democracy in process.
Why would we spend valuable time on the floor with something like that?
The valuable time on the floor we're talking about is literally a 15-minute vote. And that 15 minutes gives an opportunity, and if a member of Congress wants to waste their 15 minutes of fame, their 15 minutes of opportunity to try and change things in this country on something that nobody supports, then I think that's unlikely, number one. But number two—
Oh, I don't think it's unlikely. I think it's likely. I've been on enough committees. You and I are on a committee together.
Yeah.
I see people on our committee we share on, people that bring
well, they
forth—
waste their one opportunity.
They bring forth amendments, and the only one that's for it on the whole big committee. And so I think it is likely we'll have people who pull up amendments that most, or bills that most of us saying we're not even in the slightest interested in.
Then that member of Congress will have had their chance to make a point instead of making a law, and their constituents and the United States public will see that they've done that, and then democracy can hold them accountable.
Yeah, but one of my problems with this place is we spend too many times on the floor making points and not laws.
But I think that—
I mean, if I were anything, I think we spend too much time on what, quote, messaging bills, which I think are ridiculous because we're wasting floor time on messaging or making points and not actually making laws. You would actually enhance the ability to do that.
Well, I would argue differently, and I would like to debate it on the floor. So let's— let me invite you to join. Let me invite you to join the Problem Solvers Caucus. If you can find a Democratic colleague to join you, we'd love to have you.
There are some of us that are not in the Problem Solving Caucus that are trying to solve problems. I'm not trying to say that your group's not important. One last thing, and this is this bothers me more than anything else. And Mr. McGovern talks about this all the time, and he's never heard me say this, but I agree with him. We don't follow regular order around here very much.
I agree with that 100%.
And it detracts from the quality of the product that comes before the body. I think it really does. And it detracts from our ability to build consensus, and I think we're not building consensus. What I think we need to do more than anything else is build into our rules the structure so that we have the trust. And that's what's missing around here is the trust. And the trust has been breached on both sides. I've seen it myself. But trust is not something we can enforce by rules. Trust is something we gain by how we conduct ourselves. And there have been instances around here where people on both sides— we're not picking sides here— I think it breached that trust. What we've got to do is go back and find ways to build into the body trust. And I think that's really where you and the other members of your group are trying to get. I just have some concerns about some of the specifics that y'all propose to get there. But I want to let you know I agree with what's motivating you, where you're trying to get. Just think we need to think through a little more carefully some of the precise points that you have. But I appreciate the work y'all have done. I really do.
Well, the fact that this committee is having this hearing like this and getting people to bring these points up is a great step forward in the process. And I'm excited to hear some of the things that you're saying about the things that you're excited to see happen here. Too many of our members have never seen regular order. And we're going to have a lot of people coming to Congress next year that have never seen regular order. And a lot of people just don't know how to legislate. And we need to have this conversation, work on changing our rules so that more members have access to actually getting a law passed. And I appreciate your sentiments on this. And let's continue this debate and continue this process and come up with ideas as to how we can get that access.
But to make that work, we can't abuse regular order. And there's been abuse of regular order since I've been in Congress. And that's what causes the reaction against using regular order is when people abuse regular order. So that's the other thing we need to remember here is if we're going to all say these nice, big things and have rules that reflect what we're saying, we've got to conduct ourselves as individual members of Congress to that level. And I've seen some breaches of that since I've been here. I hadn't said anything about it. I was afraid if I said something about it, I'd make things worse. But there have been times when I wanted to jump up on the floor and say, you just made it worse by doing what you just did. So we all have to have, and I think it's an individual responsibility and a group's responsibility, we have to have the discipline to say to ourselves, if I want this body to function at that level, I have to conduct myself individually as a member of Congress at that level. And I think we have not done that in a number of instances here, and it's really upset me to see that happen.
Well, one of Martin Luther King's famous quotes was, you can't legislate morality, but you can regulate behavior. And part of the rules changes we're talking about here are trying to regulate behavior that will give people more access. So let's continue the conversation and push forward these ideas.
Yeah, thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. McGovern.
No, I thank you, and I appreciate what the Problem Solvers Caucus has done, and I think there's some really good ideas. I think some of them may need to be refined because they may have some unintended consequences. I mean, we have to prevent against chaos. I think the point Mr. Byrne was making about everybody bring a bill to the floor, it's more than 15 minutes because you're going to have to debate a bill, but if it's going to be a limited debate, you're going to have a closed rule, which we're all against. So I mean, I think we have to think about what we're asking here. But I get the point, right? And I think the other point on regular order is important. Bills should not be coming to the Rules Committee that have not gone through committee, that have not had hearings, that have not had a markup. I mean, it's all nice to be on the Rules Committee and be able to, bring things to the floor and have that, that power, I guess. But it's not the way this place should be run. And so a return to regular order is important. Mr. Byrne also, I can't believe I'm agreeing with him on things. But I mean, but his other point about people, there are some, on both sides. There are some on both sides who would take any opportunity at openness to abuse the system. I'm thinking of a case when we were in charge when one member brought 500 amendments to the Rules Committee, all slightly different than the other, like a couple of dollars less. And I mean, I get the point, but I mean that's kind of not the way we want this. That can't happen, right? That just and there's another thing here too, and I think we all have to realize this. Oftentimes some of the rules that are okay are waived, right? So we have to have a check against waiving rules that give people more ability to be able to be heard on the House floor. I think we're all looking at this like, how do we empower average members? How do we, each member, how do we empower committees? How do we, it's not always top down, how do we get more people to be part of the process? And one of the realities that whoever's in charge, whether it's the Republicans now or the Democrats, is that if in fact the people at the top are abusing the system, rank and file members have to have the courage to say no. I mean, I look at the people in the Problem Solvers Caucus here. Every Republican on this Problem Solver has voted for all 97 closed rules. Now, if some of these rules went down, I guarantee you that you wouldn't have so many closed rules. Even some Democrats on the Problem Solvers Caucus voted for closed rules. So, I mean, we can talk about, the importance of more openness, which I really believe. I've been up here for a long time, I hope, if we're in charge, that if our leadership is demanding something that is denying members the right to be heard and to be able to legislate, that we would all kind of band together and say no. But it takes courage, I mean, I alluded to in my statement, there was an article about some members in the majority, saying that people who sign discharge petitions or people who, vote against procedural motions, that there should be a consequence for them. And so if a member were to stand up and vote no, then that member might be subject to repercussions. I mean, we have to find ways to push back against that, no matter who's in charge. So I think you guys are focusing us on all good things, and when Mr. Sarbanes suggested this special committee that would be formed, not just on the rules, but on how the House is run generally, I like that idea because I think there's a check on us. But understand this, the proof is in the pudding. You can have all the perfect rules in the world, but they can be waived in this committee. And if they're waived, will members vote no when it comes for a vote on the House floor? It hasn't been happening. That's my frustration. But we need to be able to develop you know, I guess, I don't know, that we have to say enough is enough of this. And you know, we have to prevent against chaos too, right? Because there are some people, disgruntled people, who, if given the opportunity, would just, you know, abuse the openness. And so we have to, that has to be part of the check. But I think a lot of the stuff that you're proposing here, I think, is important, and we ought to be, you know, we ought to be pursuing that. But I always tell people, we as individual members, we have power already that we're not using. You know, and it's, you know, and there will be difficult times, no matter who's in charge, and difficult choices that people are going to have to make. But if we want a more open process, we're going to have to, you know, put our votes where our rhetoric is. And I know it's difficult, and it's easy, you know. So anyway, but I look forward to working with you on these, and I think, you know, if Republicans are in control, I hope that some of the ideas that you've put forward, you know, make their way into the rules package. But this is important stuff, so thank you. And Ms. Brodillo, I wanted to just say, I'm with you on all that, all this stuff. I think we ought to be able to empower delegates. They ought to have a voice here. You know, I guess the only question I would have is on some of these, you know, on like the discharge petition and so these other, you know, whether there's any legal implications. You know, on the non-decisive voting in the committee of the whole, there has been a legal decision. So that's, I get that. We just have to check to make sure that there's no challenges. But I think those are all good ideas, and we appreciate your service here.
Right ahead.